Part 38. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 371. Nan 11 was quiet for a moment, her body was tired, and she didn't want to move after sitting down, so she just said lightly, "Let my mother come in." Yes. Yins Huang walked out and asked the palace people to make tea. After a while, Xianyuan 11 came in with several maids. The maids spontaneously stood in the corner of the outer hall. Xianyuan 11 walked into the inner hall alone. When he saw his daughter with a tired face, he couldn't help but frowned. "You are not feeling well, why don't you take a good rest?" "I'm fine, don't worry, Mom." Nan 11 smiled. "Sit down, Mom, I haven't entered the palace for the past 2 days. Have you forgotten that you have a daughter while playing with the ladies?" "Not really, I just don't want to disturb you little couple." Xianyuan 11 did not sit down, but walked to the bed and glanced at Rong Yu. When she caught a glimpse of the shocking injuries on his body, her eyebrows furrowed deeply. "I heard someone told me about this. Why was it hurt so badly?" Chu Nanyi gave a simple salute. "Your Royal Highness, the eldest princess, is 1,000 years old. Please forgive me for not being able to salute you fully." "No need to be polite, just treat the injury." Xianyuan 11 waved his hand nonchalantly, his eyes still falling on Rong Yu's back. The high priest was too cruel. Did he want Rong Yu's life? Nan 11's smile faded a little. "It's not likely to kill him, but he does need to rest for a few days." Xianyuan 11 turned around and looked at her daughter thoughtfully. "What's wrong? Are you having trouble with Rong Yu?" Nan 11 shook her head. "Rong Yu can bear it." Xianyuan 11's eyes returned to Rong Yu's back. "I have lived to such an old age, and I have never seen a man from a powerful family be so tolerant. His steely how is the wool developed?" "Iron wool?" Nan 11 was slightly startled, and couldn't help but think of Rong Yu's paranoid character. He would cut off his own hand without hesitation just for her, which almost scared her out of her mind. What does pain mean to such a person? But humans are all made of flesh and blood, so how can they not feel pain? It's just that compared to physical pain, what he can't bear is emotional loss. He worries about gains and losses, has no sense of security, and is cautious. At other times, he is as aloof and arrogant as a white crane in the clouds, but emotionally he is so humble that he almost sinks into the dust. Nan 11's heart felt like needles pricking her heart, and she didn't know what to do with this person for a moment. "I was injured just after I ascended the throne. It will inevitably delay the important affairs of the government." Xianyuan 11 walked to sit opposite her. "Let the Prime Minister and Xie Xiaofu bear more burden for the time being. You are pregnant, and Rong Yu is injured again. The priest is really good at looking for trouble." Nan 11 narrowed her eyes and leaned on the brocade couch covered with soft blankets. "Fortunately, Xiejin and the others are standing outside and will temporarily let him take care of him for a few more days. The envoys from northern Xinjiang and southern Yu will be left alone for now, so don't bother with them. Chief Minister Xie and Prime Minister Lu have experience in other major affairs of the government, and they can't be messed up for a while. We can't let Rong Yu worry about it with such a serious injury." Xianyuan 11 snorted. "With such a serious injury, you really deserve a good rest for a few days." The maid outside the palace came over with freshly brewed tea and imperial pastries freshly baked in the imperial dining room. Yunya reached out to take it, poured tea for the two masters, and reminded softly, "The master has not eaten yet. Since Her Royal Highness the Princess is here now, let's have dinner with His Majesty." Yunya was afraid that Nan 11 wouldn't be able to eat. After all, her prince was seriously injured, but His Majesty was pregnant, so it wouldn't be possible if he didn't eat. Xianyuan 11 understood in his heart, turned around and said, "Qingling, come here and take your Majesty's pulse." "Yes." The young girl came over, knelt down in front of Nan 11, put a clean handkerchief on the desk, and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, please extend your wrist." Nan 11 glanced at her and then remembered that she seemed to have come with Chu Nanyi. While resting her wrists on the cases, she turned to look at her mother. Is this the female doctor from my mother's house? Xianyuan 11 nodded. Qingling has good medical skills and a good temper. I can stay by your side to take care of him in the future. Nan 11 nodded slightly. Yes. Your Majesty is a little moody today, Qingling said with a soft and gentle tone. When you are pregnant, you should avoid being angry or sad. You should always maintain an optimistic and happy mood and maintain emotional peace. Only in this way can you ensure the safety of your Majesty and the baby. Healthy. I know, Nan 11 nodded lightly. Today's situation is a bit special, I will pay attention to it in the future. Xianyuan 11 asked, do you want to prescribe some anti-fetal pills? Qingling shook her head. Fortunately, I'm a little older and the fetal position is relatively stable, so I don't need to take medicine. If the fetus is irritable and emotionally unstable when it is not fully developed, it will be detrimental to the fetus. Nan 11 hummed and said nothing more. Qingling was a discerning person. After getting up, she walked to the bed and whispered, I'll give you a hand, this slave. Chu Nanyi glanced at her and nodded in agreement. Qingling brought the warm water over, soaked it with a soft handkerchief and moistened it, then twisted it until the humidity was moderate, and carefully wiped the blood next to Rongyu's wound. Chu Nanyi glanced at her movements and strength. She had good control over them, and she could tell that she was a careful girl. So he relaxed and concentrated on his work. Having a girl who knows medical skills can obviously increase efficiency. After the palace servants prepared the meal and Nan 11, who was forced to eat in the company of Xianyuan 11, finished eating, the work of applying medicine to Chu Nan was nearing completion. Nan 11 looked at the blood that turned red again after changing the basin. She pursed her lips and said nothing. She ordered the palace servants to fetch 2 more basins of water and bring them over. By the time Chu Nanyi applied medicine to Rongyu's injury and covered his back with a thin layer of gauze, the sun had already set. Your Majesty may have a fever at night. Chu Nanyi stood up and looked at the sky outside. It's not convenient for me to stay here. Your Majesty arranged a side hall for Miss Qingling to stay tonight. I brought some antipyretic herbs. Come here, Qingling and Miss Yunyu will cook the medicine in advance at night. Well, they will start cooking the medicine at Haishi. The prince will probably wake up before midnight. If the prince starts to have a fever before he wakes up, your Majesty will ask the palace servants to pour a basin of cold water. Come here and give the prince a body rub to cool down his fever. After Chu Nanyi finished speaking, he thought about it carefully and explained the possible situations one by one. Then he packed the medicine box and bowed and said, I will leave first. Nan 11 nodded, thank you for your hard work. I don't dare, this is a matter within my duty. Nan 11 smiled lightly, if you hadn't come here tonight, I wouldn't have known you knew how to heal. Your Majesty, thank you. Chu Nanyi shook his head, I am only good at treating external injuries. I only know a little about the rest and have never been involved in it. Nan 11 hummed and said no more to him. After Chu Nanyi left, Nan 11 stood quietly in front of the bed, looking at Rongyu intently, wondering what was going on in her heart. Yunyu said respectfully, serve the prince, my servant. No need. Nan 11 shook her head, bring the water over. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 372. Yunyu moved the entire basin shelf over. Nan 11 wetted the soft towel in warm water and began to wipe Rongyu's body. First wash your cheeks and forehead, then your neck, behind your ears, shoulders, and armpits. Put a soft towel in the basin and wash it, then lift your arm and wipe it carefully. After washing both arms and wiping the soft towel to her waist, Nan 11 paused for a moment, raised her eyes slightly, and a pair of calm eyes swept from her shoulders and neck to her waist, and she couldn't help but feel a sigh in her heart. If it weren't for the injury, this smooth back would be extremely beautiful. Rongyu has always been noble and elegant, and is not a reckless man who likes to go shirtless. Therefore, even though he has strong martial arts skills, his body is not as tanned as ordinary martial arts practitioners. Her skin is fair and firm, her waist is perfect, her waist is lean, there is no fat at all, and she is so perfect that there is no flaw to be found. However, the more perfect it is, the more hideous and terrifying the scars on the back are, destroying the original beauty. Nan 11 was surprised that she was still in the mood to appreciate Rongyu's body at this time. She sighed unobtrusively and continued to wipe him. The upper body was wiped twice. After wiping, Nan 11 rested for a moment and turned to look at Yin-Yu. Yin-Yu was stunned for a moment. "Your Majesty, are you tired? Come here, slave." Nan 11 shook her head. "You go out first." Yin-Yu was silent for a moment, and then she understood what Nan 11 meant. Fortunately for her, she quickly exited the inner hall, taking the basin of used water out with her. Nan 11 took off her pants for Rongyu. When she thought about this man and it made her teeth itch, she couldn't help but slap his pert buttocks. After the spanking, she couldn't help but feel distressed and guilty. She felt that she was bullying others. His behavior was not very gentlemanly, and he was suspected of taking advantage of others' danger to bully the injured. Thinking like this, he couldn't help but start tending to the injured again without any complaints. There is a heater in the dormitory, and the temperature is already higher than outside. When Nan 11 came down from her busy work, she had beads of sweat on her body. However, she didn't plan to take a shower before Rongyu woke up, fearing that he wouldn't be able to see her if he woke up in the middle of the night. After she wiped his body clean and covered him with a quilt, Nan 11 called Yin-Yu to come in. Another basin of water was also brought out. Nanny Su brought a few more basins of hot water over. Yin-Yu said, "Slave, please wait for the master to take a hot bath. Don't go far, just in the tub behind the screen, so that if the prince wakes up, you can also hear the master's voice in time." She is thoughtful. Nan 11 thought for a moment and nodded slowly. Yes, it would be good to take a shower. This day passed so long, it was really hard to endure, but it went by quickly, and in the blink of an eye, a dark curtain fell outside the window. Nan 11 took off her clothes and soaked in the bathtub for a while. The warm water surrounded her body. The feeling of fatigue slowly swept over her, making her a little drowsy. The massage from Yin-Yu behind her made her even more sleepy. Intention strikes. However, falling asleep in the bathtub was obviously not in her plan. After only soaking for a moment, she forced herself to let Yin-Yu take the soft towel to wipe her body. After drying her body, she put on a loose and soft robe and got into bed. Rongyu was lying on the inside of the bed. Rongyu was sleeping soundly at this time. Perhaps in all these years, he has never slept so deeply for even half an hour. Today, thanks to his injury, he was able to have a good sleep. Nan 11 was lying on her side, looking at him steadily with complicated expressions in her eyes. Yin-Yu and Yin-Chuang dutifully guarded the outer hall, making as little noise as possible to avoid disturbing their master's rest. Nan 11 thought about taking care of Rongyu in the middle of the night, so before falling asleep, she told Yin-Yu, "I'll sleep for 2 hours first. When the time comes, call me to get up." The silver moon responded. Nan 11 held Rongyu's hand, closed her eyes, and quickly fell into a deep sleep. She also slept very deeply this night. But to her in the dream, it seemed more like she was half dreaming and half awake. Some pictures always appeared intermittently in the dream, making her drowsy and unable to tell whether it was a dream or reality. "What's your name?" When she first met the handsome young man, she was dressed in a luxurious long dress and looked down at him with a noble look on her face and eyes, carrying an innate sense of nobility and unattainability. "Her name is Donju, she is the most noble eldest princess of the Dongling Empire, the crown prince, and a woman who is about to ascend the throne as emperor." Naturally, it is impossible for her to be kind to a servant who is sent into the palace. But compared to the arrogance of others, her tone was the gentlest voice the boy had heard in recent days. It's just that such tenderness can't move him. The young man was pushed to his knees on the ground, looking at the bluestone floor like a stone sculpture, and turned a deaf ear to her questions. When Danshu saw this, he raised his eyebrows lightly, and a touch of interest flashed between his eyebrows. "Tell me your name, and you won't have to look at their faces or be beaten by them in the future." The boy still didn't speak, with a cold attitude, as if he didn't hear her voice. Danshu found it strange. This was the first time she had seen such a tempered young man. She could tell whether he really had a temper or was pretending to be tough. However, she knew that this young man was a servant sent by a minister in the court to please her. Although having a temper was not necessarily a bad thing, for a servant, such a temper was obviously inappropriate at the moment. So she said calmly, "I don't like disobedient people very much. If you don't want to stay here, you can go back now. I will ask your parents to treat you better and I will not blame you for this." The boy still didn't speak. In fact, Danshu knew in his heart that even if he was let go, he would not have a good life. Although she is not yet sure which minister's child he is and what status he has in the family, since it can be given as a gift to please the princess, there is a high probability that he is a dispensable person. The one who gave him the gift, how could the minister who came over fail to treat him well? So Danshu wanted to keep him here. She felt that the young man had such a tough temper and he must be smart enough to figure out how to make the best decision for her. So she said, "I ask you again, what is your name?" The young man was silent for a moment, and finally spoke, "Now that I have entered the princess's residence, my past names have turned into ashes. You can call me whatever Her Highness the Princess calls me. Does this mean that I want to give you a name?" After a moment of silence, the unruly voice stopped briefly, "Yes." His reaction was not what Danshu expected. Being untimely tough doesn't mean you have no brains. An undetectable smile appeared at the corner of her lips, and she lightly ordered, "In that case, go wash up and change clothes first, make yourself clean and tidy, and then come to my study. By the way, let's get a doctor to look at his injuries." The last sentence was given to the servant next to him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 373. The servants of the princess's mansion took the boy to wash and change clothes, and Danshu entered the study. In fact, the princess was not very old, a few months younger than the boy, and she was less than 14 this year. However, as the crown prince who would ascend the throne in 2 years, she was destined to shoulder the great responsibility of the country from birth. When she was young, she had a special tutor to teach her academic lessons and the art of being an emperor. She developed a calm and composed demeanor early on. The tutor once said that majesty is not about speaking harshly or being furious, but about being calm and composed to make people feel absolute shock and pressure, and to make people feel awe and submission from the bottom of their hearts. Demeanor is a kind of cultivation, a strong and sufficient confidence emanating from the heart. The more calm and composed one is, the more one's coercive spirit can be reflected. Danshu did more than the tutor expected in this regard. As a crown prince, her knowledge and bearing are top-notch. Although her martial arts are not top-notch, she is also good enough to protect herself. She has always believed that true confidence requires excellence in all aspects. If she does not even have the ability to protect herself, she needs to entrust her life to others for protection at all times. This is undoubtedly a risky decision. A powerful emperor cannot have weaknesses, and cannot even need others to guarantee his own safety. So Danshu is so good that people often ignore her age. After taking a bath, the boy changed into clean clothes and came to the study, standing silently in front of the desk. Dan Shu looked up at him. He was born with a handsome face and delicate eyebrows. He was indeed a rare beautiful boy. He was dressed in a green robe, which made him look slender. Even if he stood in front of a crown prince, his back was straight and revealed a bit of arrogance and a bit of unruliness, which was completely different from the humbleness and restraint of ordinary people when they met the powerful. Dan Shu found it interesting and said lightly, "What is your last name?" The boy lowered his eyes and continued to demonstrate the good quality of silence. "I'm asking questions, you need to come back in time." Dan Shu looked at him, her voice calm and gentle. "This is the rule. The 14-year-old girl is in her prime, and her stunning appearance is stunning, but since when, no one dares to stare at her face. Because the faint pressure revealed between her calm and delicate eyebrows is enough to make people's hearts tremble." The boy seems to be no exception, pursing his lips slightly, and finally hesitantly said, "I." Dan Shu keenly caught his resistance and disgust expression when he was about to say his surname, and was moved, and said calmly, "Well, since you don't want to use your previous surname, I will give you a surname of Rong, which means tolerance, and a name of Huaijin, which means beautiful. I hope you can be a gentleman with a noble temperament and open-mindedness in the future." The boy didn't say anything, but at that moment, his expression was obviously a little stunned. Dan Shu interpreted his expression as a feeling of being touched and a psychological compromise. She knew that this arrogant young man could not let go of his self-esteem for a while, so she did not continue to force him to do anything. She just said lightly, "From today on, you will stay with me and do some work as a reading and ink researching servant. Don't worry about anything else." She looked down at the files on the case, her voice was emotionless, as if she was just stating an insignificant matter. "No matter what your father's purpose is in sending you here, I have no interest in you. You don't have to treat yourself as a servant or a chess piece." The young man did not speak, looking down at the floor tiles under his feet. Dan Shu actually did not quite understand what attitude she had towards this young man. She just thought he was quite special. Unlike those gentle and noble young men from aristocratic families, he was not as good at dancing with long sleeves and polite as them, nor was he as good at flattering as them. Whether he was humorous or humble, he looked like a well-educated person. This young man did not seem to have much to like in other aspects except for his good looks. Silent, aloof, and unruly, with an inappropriate arrogance. However, perhaps things are always rare and valuable. The same is true for people. Accustomed to the humble flattery of others and all kinds of flattery, this young man's unique temperament more or less aroused Dan Shu's interest. Since then, he often followed her, went in and out of the study, and served her to study and study, but for a long time, Dan Shu did not put too much energy on him. She was very busy participating in government affairs, busy dealing with various things around her, busy participating in some activities held by the sons of noble families, and busy training her own right-hand ministers before ascending the throne. This young man followed her closely every day, but he was always silent like a shadow, with a low sense of existence-like air, but because of his overly outstanding appearance, he inevitably aroused the hostility of some people. That day, a son of a powerful official from a noble family in the imperial capital was invited to a birthday banquet. As the crown prince, she was naturally invited. Young noblemen and ladies surrounded her. They were obviously here to congratulate the birthday boy, but they kept talking about the princess. Dan Shu was used to such occasions, used to being the protagonist everywhere. Even if the birthday boy was overshadowed, he would not feel unhappy about it. Instead, he would worry that the princess would be unhappy because of the poor hospitality. If the princess was happy, they were all happy. If the princess was unhappy, they were all terrified. But on that day, the princess, who had learned to control her emotions since she was a child and never got angry easily, got angry for once. The scenery in March is undoubtedly very beautiful. The young men and ladies surrounded the princess and sat in the open hall of the garden. The breeze from all directions was mixed with the refreshing fragrance of flowers. There were various cakes on the long table in front of everyone, and the fragrance of flowers and wine was also fragrant. The atmosphere was lively and joyful. But when Dan Shu turned around and found that the boy beside her was not there, her expression paused slightly, and she asked casually, "Why hasn't Hui Jing come back yet?" Dan Shu knew that the boy went to relieve himself halfway, but he took too long. Everyone in the open hall looked at each other and shook their heads at the same time. Dan Shu didn't say anything, but just told the guards around her to go and have a look. A young man in the open hall looked a little unnatural, and Dan Shu pretended not to see it. She picked up the teacup in front of her and sipped it elegantly, with a calm expression. After a while, the guard came back and reported, "Young Master Rong was beaten." As soon as this was said, the people in the whole open hall instantly quieted down. Being beaten, Dan Shu's voice was calm, and no emotion could be heard. But he caused trouble. "Reporting to Your Highness." "No," the guard reported truthfully, "it was Your Highness who ordered someone to do it." After the voice fell, the hall became even quieter. The eldest prince was the eldest prince born by the queen, and he was a mortal enemy of the eldest princess's mother. The eldest prince had always relied on his status as the queen's legitimate son and was never willing to take the eldest princess seriously. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 374. The princes and ladies of the imperial capital all know that His Highness is at odds with the eldest princess, and they also know the reasons. According to the laws of Dongling and the consistent tradition of inheriting the throne, the eldest son of the queen has an absolute advantage. He is both the legitimate son and the eldest son, so he should be the original crown prince. But this time the throne was special. It coincided with the birth of the second empress of Dongling. It was inevitable that fate would be violated. Both the high priest and the emperor had to obey the will of heaven, so the position of prince fell to the eldest princess. The eldest princess of Dongling was raised according to the standards of a prince since she was a child. Her outstanding abilities and calm demeanor were admired by all the courtiers. Coupled with the blessing of the oracle from the priest's hall, no one would have any doubts about this prince. However, His Highness is the daughter of the queen and has a high status, so he and the eldest princess are in an invisible conflict. In fact, the ministers knew in their hearts that the eldest princess had to take the throne of Dongling. However, His Highness and the queen's family were so powerful that no one dared to offend him for a while. As a result, the eldest prince's behavior became increasingly tough. However, whether he was strong or not had nothing to do with Dan Shu. In the past, Her Royal Highness the Princess and him were on equal footing and would greet him lightly when they met. She never seemed to have any intention of overpowering the other. But the relationship between the monarch and his ministers has always been about respect, regardless of seniority. For an eldest prince and a prince to be equal, it is an offense and deliberate oppression to the prince. Just because Dan Shu doesn't care, it doesn't mean that His Highness's behavior is right. But today, His Highness touched the people around the eldest princess. Everyone was wondering, how would the eldest princess react? Continue to keep things quiet, or will this break the long-standing balance with His Highness? Dan Shu held the teacup in her hand and said in a calm voice, "Did Hui Jin offend His Highness?" The guard replied, "It seems not." "What's going on?" The guard hesitated for a moment. "Your Highness, you'd better go over and see for yourself." Dan Shu then put down the teacup, turned her eyes slightly, and looked around at the silent princes and ladies in front of her without emotion. "If you want to know what's going on, you can go with me." After saying that, he stood up and asked the guards to lead the way, and walked together to the courtyard where His Highness was. His Highness did not come here for a birthday party today, but to propose marriage, and by chance, he saw Rong Huijin. Since entering the eldest princess's residence, This young man has become a popular person in the eyes of all the noble princes in the imperial capital, not because of his noble status or his ability, but because he is lucky enough to be the person beside the eldest princess. As the future queen, every move of the eldest princess is closely watched by people. The boy whose name has been changed next to her naturally attracts more attention. Besides, he is really beautiful. He is always with the eldest princess, and he is always with him when he goes to and from the palace study room. It's hard not to notice. His Highness has been eyeing him before, but he has never had the chance to get close. Today, he finally caught the young man alone. How could he let it go? So there was a scene like this. After all the threats, intimidation, and orders had no effect, His Highness coldly ordered, "Take it down." The muscular attendant instantly grabbed the young man's arm and forced him to kneel on the ground. However, the young man's cold eyes exuded a bloodthirsty light. He turned his head and opened his mouth and bit the attendant's arm. The attendant was in pain, and violently as soon as he let go, the young man broke free from his grasp. It's just that the attendants accompanying His Highness are not idiots. As soon as he broke free, he was quickly grabbed by the shoulders by the other two attendants. When I see His Highness not kneeling down to salute, but instead acting so presumptuously, I deserve death. The fair-faced, beardless middle-aged man snorted coldly, "First slap 20. The young man's eyes were cold, and he obviously didn't want to sit still and wait for death. When the attendant came over and slapped him, he slammed his head forward. The attendant was caught off guard and was pushed back a few steps. When the two people slapping his arm saw this, they moved. He became more and more rough, but after being angered, the young man was like a ferocious little beast, scratching and biting, but with a fierceness that refused to admit defeat. He broke free from the attendant's grasp again. But there are wolves on the left and tigers on the right. Is it easy to escape from a place of right and wrong? The young man clenched his hands, pursed his lips tightly, his expression showed an unruly luster that had not appeared in a long time, and the ferocity in his eyes seemed to mean that he wanted to die with everyone present. When His Highness saw this, an interesting smile appeared on his lips. "Sure enough, you are ruthless enough, but with your three-legged cat tricks, you just got a temporary advantage with your brute strength. Do you really think you are so powerful?" As he spoke, he raised his hand to signal. A total of 8 guards, front, rear, left and right, stepped forward, gradually narrowing the scope of the young man's movement. The young man clenched his fist and suddenly struck towards the two people in the south. This decisive action, which seemed to lead to the same death, made the two guards subconsciously avoid it. The young man jumped out of the gap between the two, and then ran towards the direction of the garden. However, before he could even take 2 steps, he was caught by the guard, who reacted in time, rushed over and roughly pushed him to the ground. No matter how ferocious he was this time, he could never break free. His Highness is not in a good mood. There are so many skilled servants around him who are being messed up by a young man who doesn't know martial arts. It's really humiliating for him. However, the boy was subdued, which made him look better after all. Walking up to the young man, he looked at him condescendingly. How dare a humble servant dare to be so presumptuous in front of His Highness? He simply doesn't know how to live or die. "Brother, are you going to teach my men a lesson for me?" A cold and calm voice came from not far away, like a cool breeze blowing suddenly in spring, which made people pause for a moment. The eldest prince turned his head and looked at the girl walking on the corridor. His pupils shrank slightly, but a faint smile rose at the corner of his lips. "Brother is just teaching an ignorant servant a lesson. How did you alarm the imperial sister?" Dan Shu walked over slowly, with a slender and calm figure, calm and gentle eyebrows, and no emotion could be seen in her eyes. Behind her followed a group of young men and ladies. When they saw the young man being pressed to the ground by 7 or 8 guards, their faces changed slightly. What did Huaijin do wrong that he needed to be taught a lesson by the eldest brother? Dan Shu walked up to the young man and glanced at him lightly. The faces of the several servants who clamped him changed, and they all let go of their hands at the same time, stepped back and knelt down. Dan Shu's eyes fell on the young man's face. Although he didn't suffer a big loss, he still got a little scratched during the struggle, leaving a clear bruise on his face. Dan Shu's expression became more and more indifferent. Rong Huijin is my man. You dare to touch him, you are very brave. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 375. Her tone was low, and her expression showed no signs of anger. But with such a simple sentence, all the attendants who had made a move just now turned pale and fell to their knees in an instant. The princes and ladies who followed him also suddenly froze and did not dare to speak. What do you mean, my dear sister? His Highness narrowed his eyes and spoke in a dark and unclear tone, accusing me of overstepping my authority. Brother Imperial doesn't seem stupid. Dan Shu glanced at him emotionlessly. Even if the people in my palace commit heinous crimes, they will be dealt with by me. It should not be Brother Imperial's turn to take over. As soon as he said these words, the eldest prince's expression instantly darkened. The cold light in his eyes was like a sharp arrow, shooting straight into the girl's eyes. The tense atmosphere made the young princes and ladies around him turn pale. However, Dan Shu didn't seem to feel the cold aura she had created. She looked at the young man and said, "You dare to show off your strength even though you are inferior to others. If I hadn't arrived in time, would you have risked your life?" The young man lowered his head and said nothing, with a bit of residual cruelty still on his beautiful face. "You are the people in the great emperor's palace. I will not take action against you, so you can take charge of it yourself." Dan Shu glanced at the row of kneeling attendants and said in a light voice, "Anyone who takes action against Rong Huijin, 30 each." The eldest prince's face turned pale. "Royal sister." 13 Dan Shu ordered, "Watch them here. If anyone refuses, help them." The man in black bowed his head in response. He is the secret guard expert beside the eldest princess, ranking 13th. Since Dan Shu was established as the crown prince, he has been surrounded by as many as 18 top secret guard masters. Dan Shu did not want to name them one by one, so he simply named them according to their ranking, so 13 was his name. After saying these words, Dan Shu took Rong Huijin and left, completely ignoring the eldest prince's cold and angry expression. As for what other people would think, she didn't even care. Dan Shu, who has been the crown prince for several years, no longer needs to deliberately establish her authority. Every move she makes is completely in line with the magnanimity and coercion that a crown prince should have, whether it is the princes and princesses in the court or the princes and nobles of the major families in the imperial capital. Girls, they need to abide by the eldest princess's rules, try their best to understand the eldest princess's preferences, and always look at the eldest princess's face and act, rather than Dan Shu spending her time trying to please them. So today's simple episode, whether they understood it as Dan Shu's defense of Rong Huijin, or whether Dan Shu deliberately wanted to provoke the illusion of harmony that had been maintained between him and the eldest prince, Dan Shu didn't care. She can't stop what others think, but she has enough confidence to do what she wants. Returning to the eldest princess's mansion, Dan Shu asked Rong Huijin to wait in the study first. She went to wash up and change clothes, and then told Yin 12 to enter the palace. "Go and report to the emperor that I will borrow the help of the commander-in-chief around him in the near future use." 12 took the order and left. Dan Shu entered the study room and saw the usually aloof young man kneeling in front of the case, as if admitting his mistake. She couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. "What? Do you know you are in trouble?" The young man pursed his lips and remained silent. Dan Shu didn't embarrass him. She just walked to the chair behind the case and sat down, and began to ask about the cause and effect of the matter. Rong Huijin stated what happened in a few words. He did not add any exaggeration, but was as concise as possible. After listening to what he said, Dan Shu asked lightly, Do you know where you went wrong? The young man lowered his eyes and said, "You shouldn't cause trouble to His Highness." "I am not afraid of getting into trouble," Dan Shu said in a calm tone. "You are wrong because your skills are inferior to others and you still dare to show off. If I were not here today, do you think you would be their opponent?" Rong Huijin pursed her lips and said nothing. Although he knew what she said was right, he was obviously not convinced. Because even if he risked his life, he would not bow down to people like the eldest prince, let alone compromise and beg for mercy under their coercion. "Don't accept it," Dan Shu smiled lightly. "If you don't want to admit defeat and compromise, just work hard to become stronger. Whether you accept it or not is not a matter of words." Rong Huijin still said nothing. "Get up and practice your calligraphy," Dan Shu ordered casually. "I gave you the copybook last night. Practice according to it. I will check it later. The author has something to say. Regarding memories, they were originally in the plot. To untie the bell, one must tie the bell. Nan 11 can't remember the past, and Rong Yu's heart knot will never be truly untied. If you don't really want to watch this episode, you can save it. It won't be too long to recall at once, but starting from today, Nan 11's memory will be restored. More complete, no longer so hazy. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 376. Since that day, the boy seemed to have lost some of his arrogance. Although he was still silent in front of Dan Shu, he became more docile. In addition, he became more focused in practicing calligraphy and reading, and his ink grinding skills became more and more sophisticated. Only occasionally, Dan Shu would look up and see the boy staring at her face in a trance, as if thinking about something. Every time at this time, she would casually ask, "What are you thinking about?" The boy just shook his head slowly, and then returned to his indifferent and taciturn appearance. Then every night before going to bed, he would go out of the room alone and find a place where there were not many people to practice boxing. However, without a master to teach him, there was no standard for the moves. The conflict between the eldest princess and the eldest prince seemed to be quickly forgotten, and no one mentioned it. Neither the emperor nor the queen asked about it. Dan Shu went to the palace to listen to government affairs as usual. When the emperor asked her what she wanted the general beside him for, Dan Shu's tone sounded particularly calm. "I plan to train a general." The emperor was surprised. Train a general? Dongling attaches equal importance to civil and military affairs. There are many generals who can defend the country. Could it be that she doesn't like any of them? However, the emperor has always trusted Dan Shu and usually doesn't ask about her affairs. He gives her power to the maximum extent. Dan Shu has almost the same decision-making power as him in major government affairs. Unless the father and daughter have different opinions, they usually work together. The ministers will routinely present the imperial case for the emperor to check on the matters decided by Dan Shu, and the emperor is usually very satisfied with Dan Shu's ability. The general beside the emperor is the best master in the palace. After being asked to go to the princess's mansion, he became Rong Huijin's teacher. Dan Shu could see that the boy was stubborn and unruly, and had an innate arrogance in his bones, but such arrogance needed absolutely strong skills to match, otherwise it would only bring him disaster. So in the days that followed, in addition to the martial arts taught by the master, the first master in the palace, there was also the guidance of the Teifu. When she discussed articles with the Teifu, she would also ask the Teifu to guide the boy, and even did not mind asking the boy's thoughts and opinions on government affairs. When she returned home at night, Dan Shu would personally check his homework. As a crown prince, Dan Shu was used to being strict with herself, and was extremely strict in dealing with Rong Huijin. She even set some punishment measures for this. Sometimes the boy neglected to practice calligraphy or recitation in order to practice martial arts, and was either punished to copy books or be spanked. Under such strict and careful training and supervision, the boy's knowledge and martial arts made rapid progress. At that time, Dan Shu was smart, wise, and insightful, and had already possessed the wisdom and bearing that girls of the same age did not have. But she ignored that her attitude towards this young man had completely exceeded the limits of a servant. Her wisdom was only in government affairs and knowledge, and she was completely insensible to emotions. So every time she saw the young man staring at her in a daze or showing a strange look, she just thought he was thinking about something important. She never thought that this young man became docile day by day, gradually fading away his sharp edges in front of her, becoming submissive and obedient, and obeying her orders. It was all because of the feelings that should not have gradually arisen in her heart. "Your Majesty," the respectful voice sounded in her ears, as if the soul was suddenly pulled back from the sky. Nan 11 suddenly opened her eyes, her thoughts were still a little confused, and she was stunned for a long time before she spoke. "What time is it?" "It's the hour of high yin," you replied. "Miss Jingling is waiting outside, and Yin Chuang is preparing to go out with her to boil medicine." "Boil medicine?" Nan 11 was in a trance for a moment, her eyes turned slightly, and she saw someone sleeping beside her. She couldn't help but start to be dazed again, staring at Rong Yu's profile for a long time. The boy in the dream seemed to overlap with the appearance of the person in front of her, but one was a calm and noble adult man, and the other was a young and immature boy. "Your Majesty," Yin Yu saw her in a daze and couldn't help but start to worry. "Your Majesty didn't rest well, how about sleeping a little longer?" "I will take care of the prince." Nan 11 came back to her senses and shook her head slowly. "No." It turned out that memories can really be revived through dreams. She was almost certain at this time that Rong Yu and the priest Hall must have done something to her, otherwise how could it be so coincidental that she had just experienced something during the day and started to have related dreams at night? Even if you think about it during the day and dream at night, it can't be so effective, and even the scenes in the dream look so real, without even the slightest confusion. The only explanation is that Rong Yu is guiding her to recover the memory of her previous life in some way. The biggest difference between this dream and the previous ones is that she can finally see the faces of the two people in the dream clearly, and can empathize with Princess Danchu's emotions and thoughts. But this feeling is inevitably a bit complicated and subtle. At this moment, she is deeply in love with Rong Yu, but in the dream, she is looking at her ignorant appearance of love in her teenage years. She didn't feel anything when she fell into the dream, but now that she is awake, her mood is still quite strange. Nan 11 sighed, lifted the quilt and got out of bed. Yin Yu brought warm water, she simply washed up, and her thoughts finally came back to her mind. Nan 11 turned and walked to the bed, looking at Rong Yu who was sleeping soundly. "The prince doesn't have a fever, right?" "No." Yin Yu shook her head, "but the prince seems to be talking in his sleep." "Talking in his sleep?" Nan 11 was reaching out to Rong Yu's forehead, and was slightly stunned when she heard it. "What did he say?" Yin Yu replied, "I can't hear it clearly." She didn't dare to say that the prince called another woman's name in the dream. Although she didn't know who that woman was, she was afraid that it would cause misunderstanding if she said it out loud, so Yin Yu chose to conceal it with good intentions. Nan 11 didn't ask any more questions, but just hummed lightly. After trying it, Rong Yu seemed to have no fever, and then she felt relieved. However, before Qing Ling went to boil the medicine, she came into the palace to check Rong Yu's pulse. After confirming that there was nothing serious, she took the medicine and went out with Yin Chuang. Although Miss Jingling is from the princess's mansion, she still needs to test for poison just in case, Yin Yu said, so Yin Chuang followed her. Nan 11 smiled, turned around and walked to the brocade couch and sat down. "I'm naturally relieved when you do things." The palace servant brought the teacup over, and Yin Yu took it and presented it to Nan 11. Nan 11 held the teacup in her hand, and couldn't help but think of the young man in the dream again, and then she had an interesting idea. It turned out that Rong Yu was so powerful, and it was all because of her in her previous life. But Nan 11 raised her fair and tender hands and couldn't help but think, why is she so weak in this life? She didn't inherit the noble wisdom of the eldest princess in her previous life. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 377. It was pitch black outside the window, with only the flickering palace lanterns as the only light of the night. Nan 11 leaned against the brocade couch, her thoughts were inevitably complicated. In fact, in terms of emotions, she felt that she had some similarities with the Empress Jinghua in her previous life. The two were almost as rational, rarely out of control, and did not have the temper that many women often had, nor would they deliberately be petty, and jealousy did not exist most of the time. Or, because Rong Yu had created such a dream for her in advance, she had a preconceived sense of guilt and self-blame for him, so she had come to this relationship with an attitude of making up for it from the beginning, until she really fell in love with Rong Yu, and fell in love with him a little bit, but her attitude towards feelings was already deeply rooted. Of course, the main reason was that Rong Yu was too good to her, and spoiled her to the bone, so that she had no chance to be petty at all. But even so, Nan 11 still clearly realized that she was rational in terms of emotions. She was so rational that even after she gradually understood the truth and knew that the dream was a man-made design rather than that she had really done something to wrong Rong Yu, she could not be anxious or angry, and could even comfort his anxiety, just because she felt sorry for his emotional fragility. She was so rational that even though she knew that Rong Yu could not forget the former Empress Jinghua, and that the purpose of pushing her to the throne step by step was also because of obsession, she could still understand his difficulties, because his emotional humility made people reluctant to blame him. She was so rational that even though she knew that the deal between him and the high priest had long put her in a situation where she could not make a choice, and she could only be pushed to the current position like a puppet following the plan they had already arranged step by step, Nan 11 still could not have the slightest resentment. After reincarnation, because she still retained the memory of her previous life, Rong Huijin was Rong Yu, and Rong Yu was Rong Huijin. Empress Jinghua is the woman he loves so much that he is obsessed with her. No one and nothing in this world can match the position of Empress Jinghua in his heart, and Nangzi is the reincarnation of Empress Jinghua. Rong Jiao knows this better than anyone else. So in his heart, Empress Jinghua is Nangzi, and Nangzi is the reincarnation of Empress Jinghua. They are the same person, and there is no reason to compare. This is Rong Jiao's cognition. So who is the substitute of whom? This itself is not true. Nangzi has already recognized this, so she will not naively ask Rong Jiao who he likes. This answer is unsolvable and obvious. If there is any fault to be investigated, it is that Rong Jiao should not forcibly break her peace in this life without consulting her, and desperately want to restore her memory of the previous life. Although Empress Jinghua and Nangzi are the same person, they have different identities, different responsibilities, and different temperaments in their previous and present lives. How can Nangzi really be the Empress Jinghua she once was? At this time, while Rong Yu was still awake, Nan 11 could even think calmly. Should she follow Rong Yu's wishes and gradually retrieve the memory of Empress Jinghua, or simply live her life as Nan 11? Should she let Rong Yu's life leave regrets, or go with the flow and completely untie his knot? Nan 11 sighed at the moon outside the window. After reincarnation, she should have abandoned her past memories and started over, but there was a person who was trapped in the past and could not break free. If she insisted on being Nan 11 in this life, did it mean that Rong Yu would never be able to break free from the past in this life? Nan 11 was a little melancholy for a while as her mind turned over and over. Sure enough, since ancient times, the emotions of the imperial family were the most exciting, with ups and downs, grievances and entanglements. Now even reincarnation has really happened to her, and even stained with some mythological colors. What else can she not accept? A cup of tea gradually cooled down, and Rongyu on the bed had woken up. It was just that he seemed to have just experienced a big dream. He slowly opened his eyes. His deep pupils did not have the coldness and indifference of the past. Instead, they were filled with nostalgia and daze. He seemed to be immersed in some memories and had not yet gotten out of them. After waking up, he did not move at all. He just lay there quietly, like a still human stone sculpture. Nan 11 walked to the bed, stared at his unfocused eyes, frowned and said, "Ayu, are you awake?" Rongyu suddenly came back to his senses. All his thoughts came back in an instant. His slowly focused eyes fell on the girl sitting in front of the bed. His empty and desolate heart was filled up little by little, and soon became full and satisfied. Nan 11 reached out to his forehead. "How did you sleep this time?" Rongyu was silent for a moment, and slowly raised his body. "Don't move." Nan 11 frowned. "You are still seriously injured. Just lie there honestly and don't get up." Rongyu lay back silently, then looked at her. 11er. His voice was hoarse and dry, and it sounded a little strange. Nan 11 frowned. "Are you thirsty? Do you want some water?" As she said that, she quickly told Yinyu to bring a cup of warm water. Rongyu tried to stand up again, and Nan 11 wanted to stop him again, but she didn't know what she suddenly thought of, so she slowly swallowed the words of stopping him and took the initiative to support him. "Be careful." Rongyu sat on the edge of the bed, and his body was sweating from the pain again, but he looked okay, at least his expression didn't show anything unusual. Nan 11 was silent for a moment, and said calmly, "Do you want to change clothes?" Rongyu nodded. Nan 11 said, "I'll let Qingyang help you go." "No." Rongyu refused. "You go with me." Nan 11 was embarrassed, "But I don't have much strength." "What if you fall down halfway?" Rongyu's expression was subtle. "Am I that weak? Now you are injured, isn't it normal to be weak?" Nan 11 raised an eyebrow. "Or do you think you can kill a tiger now?" While the two were talking, Yinyu brought water over, first helped Rongyu rinse his mouth and clean his face, and then handed him the warm water to moisten his throat. Rongyu drank a cup of warm water, handed the teacup to Yinyu, and then slowly stood up with the help of Nan 11. The man who was extremely strong during the day was now weak and visible to the naked eye. Although resting for several hours can relieve fatigue, it also makes the relaxed body feel the overwhelming pain, which is so piercing that it seems as if a layer of skin and flesh on the back has been torn off. Rongyu couldn't help but purse his thin lips, holding Nan 11's hand, standing still and waiting for the dizziness caused by the severe pain to pass. The pain is real, and the weakness is real. But if there really is a tiger here, he may be able to kill it. So wrestling is impossible, he just wants her to accompany him. Author has something to say. The changing clothes here means going to the toilet, which is a more elegant way of saying it. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 378. After getting dressed, Rongyu sat on the edge of the bed. Nan 11 washed his hands and face while Nan 11 washed his hands and face for the last time. She made sure that he was not feverish and felt relieved. Chu Nanyi said that you might have a fever at night, so he specially left Qingling to prepare the medicine in advance. Nan 11 smiled lightly, "But I think your physique is strong enough, so you just didn't get hot." Rongyu's eyes fell on the raised corners of her lips. He was silent for a moment and then whispered, 11er is in a good mood. Nan 11 was stunned for a moment, then raised her eyebrows. "You woke up safely and didn't have a fever." "Of course I'm in a good mood. Should I be frowning?" Rongyu slowly shook his head. "That's not what I meant. It was because she didn't look very happy before he fell asleep." He knew that his behavior of not caring about his body had annoyed her, and he could feel her cold attitude before, so he asked this question. Nan 11 sighed, "Who made me like you?" When I see you sad, I feel heartbroken. How can I still have the energy to fight with you? Besides, it's just because I'm worried about your health, and there's no other reason. It's not worth it. Waste your time on the Cold War. When Rong Yu heard this, he breathed a sigh of relief. Yes. After a moment of silence, Rong Yu held her hand and raised his eyes slightly, as if he wanted to speak but hesitated. What's wrong? Nan 11 looked at him puzzled. Are you feeling uncomfortable? Rong Yu shook his head and looked at her with an obvious look in his eyes. However, Nan 11's face seemed to have no other expression except worry and concern. Are you hungry? Nan 11 asked him. I asked them to go to the imperial kitchen to get some porridge. It's late at night and you are injured, so you can only eat something light. Rong Yu obviously didn't care about what he was eating. The corners of his lips moved. He clearly had something to say, but somehow he couldn't say it out. Nan 11 just pretended not to know. Not long after, Qingling and Yinshuang walked into the hall. Yinshuang was holding a tray with 2 bowls of fried soup on it. This medicine is for reducing fever, and the other medicine is for wound healing. Qingling walked into the inner hall and glanced at Rong Yu. I want to take the regent's pulse. Please ask the regent. Before she finished speaking, Nan 11 had already grabbed Rong Yu's hand and stretched it out. Qingling narrowed her eyes and quietly checked Rong Yu's pulse. After a moment, she raised her eyes to look at Rong Yu's face and hesitantly probed his forehead. Is that okay? She had heard that the regent had a cold and ruthless temperament and would never let women get close to him easily. Apart from His Majesty, he was not allowed to have skin-to-skin contact with any woman, otherwise he would be very angry. Before Rong Yu could speak, Nan 11 had already spoken. There is nothing wrong with a doctor treating a disease. Rong Yu said nothing. So Qingling cautiously stretched out her hand to touch Rong Yu's forehead, not daring to press too close to it. She only touched it with 2 fingers and quickly withdrew. Fortunately, the regent doesn't have a fever. So there is no need to take antipyretic medicine. Qingling turned around and took out a bowl of dark concoction from Yinshuang's tray. She was about to hand it to Rong Yu, but Nan 11 reached out to take it. Is this medicine for injuries? Can I try it? Nan 11 looked at Qingling and asked, will it affect the child? Rong Yu's expression changed slightly. 11er. If you just taste it, it won't have any effect, Qingling said, frowning slightly, but the medicine is very bitter. If your Majesty is worried about the medicine, you can let the palace people try it. Before she finished speaking, Nan 11 had already stirred it with a spoon, then picked up the spoon, tasted the concoction on the white jade porcelain spoon with the tip of her tongue, and clicked her tongue twice, as if she was tasting some delicious delicacy. Yunya quickly got some water to rinse her mouth. What are you doing, Your Majesty? All the slaves are here, and it's not Your Majesty's turn to do the poison test in person. Nan 11 rinsed her mouth and said calmly, who told you that I was doing a drug test? With Yunya Yin's Huang here, she must have made sure that the decoction was non-toxic before she dared to bring it over. What kind of poison does she need to test? Yunya was puzzled. Then why does Your Majesty? I want to taste how bitter this medicine is. Nan 11 spoke calmly and began to feed Rong Yu the medicine with a spoon. I didn't put enough Coptis chinensis, so I will add 2 ounces more to tomorrow's medicine. Yunya was speechless. Add 2 more taels of Coptis? Qingling's expression paused. Does Your Majesty know how bitter this medicine will be if 2 taels of Coptis are added to it? Rong Yu opened his mouth to drink the medicine in silence, thinking to himself that it seemed that he had relaxed too early, and 11er's anger was obviously not gone yet. The inner hall was silent for a moment. Both Yunyu and Qingling realized that something was not right in the atmosphere, and turned around silently and retreated. Nan 11's expression looked calm and gentle, feeding Rong Yu the medicine 1 mouthful at a time. Her movements were particularly gentle and meticulous, and she stopped occasionally. Took out a handkerchief and wiped the fine sweat on Rong Yu's forehead. She really looks like a standard good wife and mother, taking care of her husband in every possible way, virtuous and gentle. He was weak, prone to sweating, and with pain all over his body. Rong Yu didn't feel very good at this time, but it didn't matter whether he was feeling well or not. He didn't say anything, and just drank the bowl of medicine in silence. Nan 11 put the empty bowl aside and saw another layer of fine sweat on Rong Yu's forehead and nose. She wiped him with a handkerchief and said, "I wiped your body again when you fell asleep at night. If you sweat a lot after eating the porridge, I'll wipe it again." Rong Yu was about to say something when he saw Qing Yang had already brought the porridge in. The white porridge carefully cooked in the imperial kitchen is crystal clear and fragrant, making you appetizing just by looking at it. "Your Majesty, you have worked hard tonight, please take a rest," Qing Yang said, "come here to serve the master." Yin Yu stood aside and said with a smile, "Since entering Dongling, the prince and his majesty have been together all day long. Qing Yang, the personal guard, has almost lost his sense of existence. He stays outside all day enjoying the wind, and Sunday he looks so pitiful alone. Today, I finally have the opportunity to serve the prince again. Master, let him fulfill his duties as a subordinate." Qing Yang heard this and rarely sang against Yin Yu. Instead, he nodded repeatedly, "Yes, yes, the work of serving people should be done by subordinates. How can the princess, well, how can His Majesty do it personally? The title of His Majesty is still a bit unfamiliar and difficult for him. After all, Nan 11 just ascended the throne today. The new identity is even a brand new role change. It takes time for Qing Yang to accept it. His master was originally a powerful regent. Although he is still the regent now, he has become the subordinate of the princess. It really makes people sigh at the wonders of the world." Rong Yu looked at Qing Yang expressionlessly, his eyes revealing a bit of indifference. Qing Yang was stunned. Did the master not welcome him? Taking care of the husband should be done personally. Nan 11 raised a soft arc at the corner of her lips and calmly took the porridge. "You can go down. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 379. Qing Yang and Yunyu had to leave silently. When they reached the outer hall, Qing Yang turned his head hesitantly to look at Yunyu, and lowered his voice and said, "The princess looks so gentle." Yunyu hummed, "Call me your majesty." "Yes, your majesty looks so gentle." Qing Yang changed his words, and couldn't help but struggle for a moment after saying it, not knowing whether it was his illusion, "but I feel chilly all over, Yunyu, do you think it's weird?" Yunyu glanced at him silently and said, "Not at all, I feel chilly all over too." The two looked at each other, as if they exchanged a tacit look, and then they moved their feet at the same time. One walked silently to the outside of the hall and stood, and the other walked to the corner of the screen and stood. Are kind and gentle people definitely not tempered? No, absolutely not. On the contrary, once such a person gets angry, it will definitely make people feel cold. Nan 11, who made people feel chilly, did not have the energy to care about what Qing Yang and Yunyu were thinking at this time. She was now taking care of Rong Yu wholeheartedly, with extremely gentle movements and full of patience. To be honest, putting aside the experiences and identities of the past and present lives, and whether she was stupid or not, Nan 11 herself was a kind and gentle girl, which was beyond doubt. When she was a girl, Nan 11 was a little girl without any scheming. If she liked someone, she would be infinitely good to that person without asking for anything in return. This was her nature, and she would not consider the gains and losses all the time. Even if she later found out that she liked the wrong person, she suddenly realized that she had revenge on that person and had grievances, she would never take such grievances out on other people. She liked clearly, and hated clearly, without any ambiguity. So when she really showed her gentleness and virtue, people would feel that she was definitely the best woman in the world, and even the most hard-hearted people could not resist her gentleness. Just like Rong Yu at this time. Just like the process of taking medicine just now, eating porridge was also silent. Nan 11's feeding action at this time was as careful as an old mother taking care of her child. She blew every mouthful of porridge to cool it down before giving it to him, as if she was afraid of scalding him. But Rong Yu looked at her smiling expression, which was clearly like a spring breeze, and for a moment he was a little scared to speak. The bowl of porridge was soon finished. Nan 11 said, "Do you want another bowl?" Rong Yu shook his head. Nan 11 put the bowl aside. "Do you feel uncomfortable? I'll ask Yin Yu to fetch water for you to wipe your body." Rong Yu pursed his lips. "I mean, let Yin Yu fetch water and bring it in, and I'll wipe your body." Rong Yu was silent for a moment, and nodded slowly, "Yes. You are really frugal with words." Nan 11 sighed lightly, turned around and told Yin Yu to fetch water. At Yin Yu's command, a palace servant soon came in with hot water. Nan 11 praised Yin Yu for her thoughtfulness. She knew that her prince wanted to take a bath, so she had people prepare the water early. Yin Yu did not dare to take credit. "Your Majesty is taking care of the prince tonight. I am a little uneasy because I am idle. I feel that I have failed in my duty. The palace has a large group of maids, female officials and palace maids, but it is indeed uneasy for His Majesty to take care of the regent personally. What's more, it is late at night and Nan 11 is pregnant. If it were normal times, the palace servants would have knelt on the ground in fear. After all, they have served in the palace for many years, and have never seen the king of a country condescending to serve others." Fortunately, Nan 11 had Yin Yu and Yin Shuang by her side, and told them in advance that they didn't need to be nervous. The regent and His Majesty just had too deep feelings for each other, and they didn't want to let others do it. Moreover, although the regent was seriously injured, Nan 11 never said a harsh word from beginning to end, nor did she lose her temper with anyone. This invisibly alleviated the fear and anxiety in the hearts of the palace people, making the first night of the coronation ceremony relatively peaceful. Nan 11 asked Rong Yu to sit on the edge of the bed, carefully wiped his body again, and changed him into a snow-white and clean pajamas. Then the nanny brought people in to dismantle the mattress and replace it with a clean one. After all this tossing and turning, it was already past midnight. Rong Yu honestly lay back on the bed. Nan 11 was lying on his inner side, supporting her forehead to see that his profile was still white and thorough. "Does it hurt a lot?" Rong Yu turned his face to the side and curled up Nan 11's hair with his fingers. "It's okay. It's okay." Nan 11 knew that his okay was definitely too much for others to handle, but she had no interest in arguing with him about this, and said calmly, "On the way to Dongling before, I heard you mention the Empress Jinghua, saying that she was the oldest among the royal heirs." Rong Yu was slightly startled, then hummed. "Doesn't she have an imperial brother?" "Imperial brother?" Rong Yu was silent for a moment, as if thinking back. "He is not the heir of the emperor, and he died before he reached adulthood." Nan 11 was surprised. Not the heir of the emperor. But in her dream, that person seemed to be born by the queen. Is it that the information displayed in her dream was wrong? Well, no. Rong Yu obviously didn't have a deep impression of this person, or that person was so insignificant that he didn't deserve to be taken seriously. Nan 11 hummed, thinking that it should be some royal secret. If the emperor found out that the eldest son was not his own, he would naturally not announce it to the world, but would find a reason to kill him openly, and then completely erase this person from the genealogy. In fact, Nan 11 could figure it out. Rong Yu fell in love with Dan Shu before she ascended the throne, but all the unforgettable things happened after she ascended the throne. From the time he ascended the throne at the age of 16 to his death at the age of 30, those 14 years belonged to Rong Huijin's life. Memories outside of those 14 years may not be worth remembering. 14 years that are unforgettable. Nan 11 lowered her eyes and thought that those memories, whether beautiful or painful, should be difficult to erase. Especially his obsession was so deep that he wanted to carry the memories of his previous life with him even if he died, just to find the person he loved in his previous life in this life. He was really possessed by a demon. If he was forcibly stopped, it would be a bloody injury to both of them. 11er Rong Yu's eyes were fixed on her calm appearance, and his voice was a little depressed and uneasy. Do you hate me for deceiving you? Nan 11 looked up at him. Deceiving? Rong Yu pursed his li. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 380. Everything has a cause and effect, and it cannot be explained by simple right or wrong. When Rong Yu heard what she said, he felt even more guilty. He used to only focus on doing what he wanted to do, as if all his efforts were to achieve the final goal. He never thought about whether such a thing was right or wrong, and whether it was right or wrong for Nan 11. Is it fair? He didn't have the time or energy to think about it. He was trapped too deeply by his obsession, and all his emotions and memories were intertwined, which bound him to many thoughts that he shouldn't have and didn't dare to think about. He only knew how to walk step by step in the direction he said, without ever having any doubts. But now, he noticed the complicated thoughts hidden under Nan 11's increasingly silent expression. Seeing that she was still gentle and generous even though she was obviously not happy, he felt that he was being too selfish for a moment. However, what was most unforgivable to him was that even if he knew that she was unhappy, he seemed to be unable to stop the development of things. She had already sat on the throne and already knew the truth hidden in his heart. Just like she once asked herself over and over again, what exactly did she like about her? When did you start falling in love with her? Now that the answer is in front of her, most of the truth has been revealed. She already knows all the stories of her past and present lives. She only needs to retrieve those long-lasting memories, and she will understand the relationship between Empress Jinghua and Rong Huijin in her past life. A love entanglement that lasted for 14 years but was not perfect. If it ends here, Rong Yu will be unwilling to do so, and the hidden secrets of the story that have not yet been revealed will become a thorn in their hearts for the rest of their lives. Both of them will be hurt by this thorn. Rong Yu is familiar with the past, so he will love Nan 11 as always, but he is afraid that Nan 11 will get bored under the torment of this thorn, become alienated from him, and gradually alienate him. He didn't dare to take such a risk, and he couldn't afford it. If he loses her again, he won't know the meaning of his life in this world. He can't bear the pain of losing her. It's such heart-piercing torture and suffering that it can make him suffocate. He never wants to bear it again in this life or the next life. So I can only use her kindness and gentleness, her tolerance and affection for him, to force those memories on her bit by bit, and forcefully trap her around her, trap her on the throne of the country, and even trap her. In the dual memories of Dan Shu and Nan 11, they locked her up with the responsibility of all the people in the world, forcing her to find her original love and love for him, making her unable to let go of the ties between her past and present lives, and... But I'm still not happy. Nan 11 spoke calmly, interrupting Rong Yu's thoughts of hesitation and self-loathing. Girls always have some small emotions, although I don't know that I am unhappy. No matter what, but in the days to come, you'd better tolerate my unhappiness and petulance. Rong Yu slowly raised his eyes and stared at Nan Ziyun's slightly displeased expression. His tense heartstrings seemed to relax all of a sudden. He pursed his lips gently and hummed in a subtle way. Then, as if he was afraid that his response would not be sincere enough, he whispered, I will listen to you in everything. The corners of Nan 11's lips raised slightly, and her voice was neither salty nor bland. Do you dare not listen? Rong Yu quickly shook his head. I don't dare. Nan 11 was really tired and didn't want to continue talking to him. She stretched out her hand and pulled the quilt to cover the two of them. She said in a calm tone, I'm very tired from this day and a half. When your injuries are completely healed, I'd better compensate you in full. When Rong Yu heard this, he finally couldn't help but stretched out his hands to wrap her in his arms. However, the position he was lying on was not very convenient. Nan 11 reached out and patted his paws away. Be honest. Rong Yu stared at her face with nostalgia. The emotion in his eyes was so strong that it made people feel distressed. 11 Rong Huijin loves Dan Shu, and Rong Yu loves Nan 11, he said softly. Rong Huijin's love is humility and surrender. Rong Yu and Nan 11 are a legitimate couple. Nan 11 was silent for a moment. Well, in this life, we have finally resolved the regrets between Rong Huijin and Empress Jinghua. Rong Yu felt a pain in his heart. Pity. For them, that life was more than just a regret, it was the deepest and most painful wound in their hearts. But compared to those, Nan 11's words made him feel ashamed. Rong Yu endured the pain in his body and hugged her tightly in the end, burying his head on the side of her neck. I will still be your minister in this life. Nan 11 said nothing and stared down at him for a while, then slowly stretched out her hand to touch the top of his head with a hint of comfort and tolerance. Go to sleep. Most of the night has passed, and it will be daybreak if I don't sleep. Yin Yu stayed outside the palace until the two masters finally decided to go to sleep, then went in and turned off the lights, leaving only a palace lantern emitting a faint glow. The bowl of decoction that Rong Yu drank had ingredients that could help him sleep. He was seriously injured and was in severe pain. Chu Nanyi specially told him to mix some sleep aid ingredients into the Qingling decoction so that Rong Yu could have a good rest for a few days. Coupled with the fact that his beloved woman was by his side, he relieved his burden and fell asleep naturally. In order to let them sleep a little longer, Yin Yu covered the window curtains tightly. When the sun rose high the next morning, no light shone into the inner hall at all. On the campus far away from the palace, Northern Xinjiang Prince Duanwu and Situ Suanju beside him expressed their strong dissatisfaction in front of Dongling ministers and complained about Dongling's lack of hospitality. However, such dissatisfaction did not reach the queen. In the bedroom, Xiejin, Xianyu and Yao, Xianyu and Qi, and Chu Hongii were enough to shut them up. However, there are some things that do need to be consulted by Her Majesty. Your Majesty. Qingling stood in the outer hall and respectfully asked Nangzi for her opinion. Do we really need to add 2 tails of coptis to today's soup? As soon as this was said, the inner and outer halls fell silent at the same time. Yunyu and Yin's Huang stood silently in the corner, while the other palace servants who were busy with their duties paused slightly and continued to do what they were supposed to do. Just make sure that your movements are light enough so as not to disturb the two masters in the inner hall. I am already the emperor, am I not? Nangzi's voice came from the inner hall, light and without any special emotional fluctuations. How can the emperor's words be false? When she said this, she was looking at Ranjaya, who had just opened his eyes. The four looked at each other, and the atmosphere was warm and subtle for a while. Qingling got a definite answer, respectfully accepted the order and withdrew, and began to boil medicine for the delicate regent. Nan 11 raised an eyebrow at someone slowly and calmly. Add 2 liang of coptis root to clear away heat and detoxify. What do you think? Rong Yu had no intention of resisting and was extremely obedient. I will listen to your majesty.